Okay, I'll just get the right. Well, welcome everyone to this latest Chartered Institute of Logistics and Transport webinar. Tonight is the last webinar for the year, close to Christmas, just a few weeks away. And we thought that we'd end this year on an interesting seasonal note and set the scene hopefully for next year. So tonight we've got a very special guest, Mark Geneva. Now, before I introduce Mark, I just want to actually run over the subject and the theme of tonight around omnichannel logistics. Because when you think about it, from buying a high-end smartphone to the purchase of a simple bucket and mop, shopping online as we know it has increased exponentially during COVID. And of course, at the same time, there's been an equally significant rise in the number of complaints from end consumers. Goods advertised that are no longer available, extensive delays in processing orders and receiving goods, orders suddenly being cancelled and difficulties getting a refund. So the easy part of e-commerce, as we all know, is launching an online presence and opening up a call center, etc. And of course, putting new salespeople on the road. But the hard part is ensuring that the supply chain has the capability, the capacity, and the processes in place to deliver on orders and ensure a delightful customer experience every time, and to do it all at speed while under the constant stress of operating in a COVID-soaked environment. Businesses more than ever now need to accommodate the many different channels through which customers want to interact with them. Empowered by the phone in their pocket, customers are hopping between channels these days, comparing products and services and expecting time-sensitive deliveries. Even free shipping is a God-given right. So it's no longer a multi-channel service world we live in, it's an omni-channel world. So tonight we're very pleased as Chartered Institute of Logistics and Transport in New Zealand to welcome Mark Geneva, who is Director of Business Services at Intent Group. Now, Mark provides program management consultancy, business analysis, and business development for Intent Group and their clients. Mark has accumulated quite a bit of experience over the years running operations across multiple locations with multicultural teams. His current and his recent roles draw on his strategic thinking as well as on a disciplined focus on operational delivery excellence. Now, Mark is here to talk to us tonight about how omnichannel service delivery and omnichannel logistics can help us as transport and logistics service providers stay ahead in our COVID new normal. We'll learn tonight from Mark how omnichannel approach to business provides a seamless, unified and contextual experience for customers and clients, irrespective of the device they use and the channels they use to communicate and interact. This is a highly relevant topic for us in our COVID environment, as we all seek to bring our economy back to as much of a normal state as possible and ensure that our respective businesses and our roles within them remain resilient, responsive, and agile in this era of continuing disruption and uncertainty. So without further ado, Mark, I think that's a pretty decent intro to you. The floor is now yours.
Yeah, thanks, Rob. I'm hoping I can live up to all the expectation there.
I'm sure you can.
Yes. Thank you very much. So good evening, everyone, and thanks for joining to listen to some thoughts about omnichannel. Talking to Rob a couple of months ago when we were going to put this together, we took the approach that people would have a limited understanding of the term and what it actually means. So Rob did read out some of the article that we posted on LinkedIn a while ago, just to kind of set the scene, which is great. And so I'm actually going to turn the video off to save the bandwidth because in my rural area, my teenage daughters are probably using more than they should do, and I'll share my screen. So I'm hoping people can see that.
Yes, we can.
And now I've lost my ability to turn me off. If you can do that for me, Rob.
Yep, I'll do that. Stand by.
Yeah. Okay. So tonight we'll step through some basic questions. So what is omnichannel? Why is it important? When do we start thinking about this? Who needs to be involved? Where do we start? And indeed, how do we start? And it's important to note that really everyone's omni-channel will be a little bit different. So this presentation is not really going to be prescriptive about what you have to do and define your future state for you, but it's kind of more of a guide to the current state, some analysis around the current state and the potential journey that you might need to go on. So the article and presentation are not dismissive of all the efforts in New Zealand around online or omnichannel. Some are actually doing it well and some are successful. I suppose this is a bit of a call to action for the collective industry, logistics, transport, retail, to keep pace with the global market, because it's actually moving apace. And again, so not everyone's omnichannel will be the same. So if you're in apparel retail, you might have to focus more on the return of a piece of clothing that doesn't fit. Rob and I were talking earlier about food delivery. Maybe you need to be more aware of expiry dates or temperature requirements. If you're in the agricultural sector, what about chemical hazards and people having the correct certification to use the chemical hazard at the point of delivery, or even the weight of the delivery itself? In general merchandise, you might have things to consider around the size of the packaging. Is 25 kilo bag online the right option and a 5 kilo bag in store? Or you might have troubles breaking pallets apart to fulfill the store and or the online channel at the same time. And in tourism, how do you purchase your ticket in advance and then have rights to activities or make supplementary purchasing easy? And then maybe you send the person a photograph afterwards. So as you see, the few examples there across industries, there'll be different nuances for each business and business model indeed. And each of those industries has its own maturity. You know, in Europe, the clothing industry is quite well advanced. And certainly in America, you know, tech online, they've been delivering tech online for a long time. If you think about the original Dell model. But New Zealand as a whole kind of lags behind other OECD countries in adoption, partly because of the distributed population, geographic challenges, and the lack of the fast broadband. But the broadband thing's starting to change now. And so 10 years ago, when my team were trying to deliver what is now turned an omni-channel, we were struggling with an online channel, a call center, stores, roving salespeople. And actually, when I read the HBR article in 2011 on omnichannel, it kind of crystallized in my mind that that's actually what we're trying to do. And I think there's still a lot of people in the population, and I mentioned to a couple of people today, I was going to do a presentation on omnichannel today, and they didn't know the term or really realize that's what they do on a day-to-day basis now. And so stepping back into this world, you know, this year, and then COVID hitting quite quickly, I was really intrigued by, well, where was the status of omnichannel almost 9 or 10 years later, and this whole spike in online shopping. And so if you see the graph there, the impact of COVID and this big spike through level 3, and then going down into the second spike in lockdown 2. But the question really is, has this flipped the behavior? But you can see through the September figures that it is still higher than last year, and will probably still have climbed. Although some people's experiences of shopping during lockdown might have made them retrench slightly. And this presentation is not necessarily all about online shopping, but in some ways, online retailing and in particular mobility is key within the direction of the development of omnichannel in New Zealand, especially as large global players with their need to expand start targeting New Zealand further. And we were just having a discussion about some of the things that Amazon may or may not be up to that you're not aware of. And so just doing a bit of a sweep around the papers and the market. So this is Gracie from Mighty Ape, wrote a nice few articles during COVID about Kiwi retailers are getting better with online shopping, and made some nice comments about Kiwis adopting better, a bit self-serving because they're the first Kiwi online shopping site. But you then do the walk around the press on Monday and you find they've just been sold. So they've been sold to Australian retail and insurance giant Kogan for about 1.28 million New Zealand dollars. Mighty Ape has more than 895,000 subscribers in New Zealand, so they're touching 20% of the population. So they're actually a significant business. And if you actually look at what Kogan's going to bring in terms of some of its technical products, vertically integrated supply chain, I think those tech retailers on the high street in New Zealand probably better beware, because there's a different game going on here, and there's some powerful global players now going to come and cause some change. So online spending in New Zealand was 4.2 billion in 2018, about 9% of the retail sales across the country. That went up to 5 billion last year and is expected to get up to about 14% 22-23. In comparison, the USA is about 14% last year and rising, but probably rising at a quicker rate. So if you think about the technology that needs to sit behind that, the technology players are catching on to this, and you'll see the tools for selling and coordinating retailing across the front end. They're expecting that platform market to hit 11 billion by 2023. So the tech giants aren't shy of this topic either. And if you think about, I was really intrigued by this. So Amazon, you should all know, and Zalando are the biggest clothing online retailer in Europe, highlighted in blue. They're actually going back to bricks and mortar. And you dig a little bit further into that, and you do find that some of these online only propositions, it is actually quite costly to run that. So the cost of goods sold is actually quite high. And that might be one of the drivers why some of these players are actually coming back onto the high street. So let's go back to a bit of a definition. So what is omnichannel? So omnichannel customer experience is defined as a cross-channel, customer-centric approach through which a company aims to provide a seamless, unified, and contextual customer experience, irrespective of device, channel, or platform of interaction. So, nice definition. You need to read it a few times to really pick it out. So maybe this one's easier. Anytime, anywhere, from any device. Gives you a flavor of that mobility I was talking about. So, a lot of this is going to be retail off the phone. Certainly my teenagers are nowhere without a phone, and probably my wife is too. But it gets even simpler. So order from anywhere, fulfill from anywhere. And as in the supply chain industry, that gives me a shiver down my back when I look at fulfill from anywhere. That's really difficult to achieve. So what is omnichannel? A bit further. Well, it's not multi-channel. Multi-channel was kind of yesterday's news, really, even though some businesses in New Zealand are still at that step of maturity. So the diagram's a bit simple. There's probably more channels than this, but there's a web, there's a store, and there's a phone. And 15 years ago, you'd probably expect somebody to go in the store and stay in the store. They'll talk to the store person about the research, they'll purchase in the store, and they'll take it home, and you might never see them again, and they might never return it. But these days, you probably need to start thinking around the multi-channel with this high engagement. So you don't hide your product details, because you're giving away information about your product online. Actually, the more you can put online, or the more that you can put in front of customers and keep them engaged, actually, the better. And actually, the whole proposition goes beyond the purchase. So, it's all about that delivery and returns, and probably another step on from that. Are you actually getting value from the purchase after you've bought it? So one of my experiences during lockdown is I'm a member of a buying group, and I put my order in online, and I went to the store to pick it up in a COVID-friendly traffic jam through the store in my car, only to find that I needed to rekey in my account number. So they've got half of it right, but they haven't done the final part by making sure the data all lined up to get people through the store quicker. So your omni-channel journey now is a bit more like this. You might do some web research, you might ring somebody, you might purchase off the web, you might go and pick it up, it might get delivered to you, you might return it, you might get it back in a different channel. It's drawn in a wavy, hazy way because you won't do it twice the same way, and nor should you as a retailer or a logistics expert expect them to do that. Really, it's, this day and age, it's what are they trying to do at what time of the day and at what location they're doing it. The store's not open at 11 o'clock at night. They're going to try and fulfill it in a different way. In January 2017, Harvard Business Review revealed some results of the study of 46,000 shoppers in the US across a 14-month period between 2015 and 2016. The data highlighted the importance of the omni-channel retailing for all brands, particularly those across bricks and mortar and online. So 7% of the study participants were only online shoppers, 20% were store-only shoppers, and the remaining majority, yeah, you guessed it, 73% used multiple channels during their shopping journey. There's not really a comparison, you're up at 73% versus 20 or 7%. So I know America is probably a little bit further ahead than us, but this is what we need to start thinking about as it starts to flow down towards New Zealand. So we mentioned the customer a few times in this, so it's all about the customer centricity. This person at the center, and they creating new demands on the supply chain, and indeed customers are getting more demanding, so excuse the play on the words there, but in the world of the app and the instant gratification, the supply chain has some serious expectations to live up to. So at the center of this world, these consumers are now expecting time critical delivery, real demand variability. You don't know from one moment to the next what product is going to be hot and what's going to be not hot, if you like. People are expecting a wider product range as people's tastes for delivery wherever they want it starts to pick up. People want it personalized, so you need to think about how you can personalize the product to them. That's not just shoe size, it might be in many different ways. And then it's this flexible fulfillment. People might actually want it delivered to a car somewhere. So why is this important? Why is it important to us for supply chain professionals? Well, the increasing amount of businesses moving to an omni-channel business model is incredibly important, with all the changes that's going to be required to support them. The complexity becomes a challenge for all partners in the supply chain, and those that get this right, there's a big prize, albeit at the moment that prize might just be staying afloat. DHL, the DHL radar, notes that the next generation of retail requires logistics networks tailored to the needs of each single channel. This new face of retail will require logistics providers to maintain an integrated view of all customer channels and inventory, along with dynamic delivery and fulfillment options and seamless customer service expectations. So if we take the model that we ran there before, and we have the customer in here, and this is what the customer wants, and around the edge we're going to say, right, well, this is what it means for us as supply chain professionals. So firstly, the cross-channel inventory, we need increased visibility of this. So do you know where the stock availability is across your network, your store, your warehouse, in transport, or in a wider context, held upstream at the producer or wholesaler? So you have the capability to make a promise. You need optimized inventory holdings. Have you done a deep dive piece of analytics on historical sales or historical transport of goods, and played that forward with promotion scenarios and understood where you're best to accumulate your inventory? So you've got full flexibility across your channels, so you know where products are and you've got an availability to promise. You're going to need increased demand planning and accuracy. So with the world changing and new players emerging in international online purchasing, how's your demand going to change? Are your promotions planned across all channels and in conjunction? So you've got the product pre-positioned and available in the channels where you're going to try and create the demand. And, you know, and there's a certain amount of thinking there in terms of being clever about how you create the demand so you make it easier for yourself. So then the more customer focus, so the cross-channel customer status, can you recognize the customer whichever channel they came through? You know, in some ways, a loyalty program is great. Like I gave my account number previously so they know who I was, but that'll give you some tracking across channels, but you need to be thinking of other ways of understanding the customer status in different channels. You need a deeper understanding of the customer. So yes, your loyalty program, if you can get them involved in one, gives you some understanding, but you need to go much detailed than that. And there's plenty of avenues today to collect more data about your customers and segments. And there's much more tech available to help you process that data and come to some meaningful conclusions. Flexible logistics and fulfillment means you've got to invest in these to actually meet that expectation. And part of that goes back to the deeper understanding of your customer. You know, where might they be? When might they want something? Can you preempt this so you can actually have the fulfillment capability set up in advance? And so McKinsey states that traditional supply chains are not often built for same-day delivery with excellent customer service. So you might be able to get it there, but how are you going to make that experience wonderful for them? You know, if you're shopping on Amazon, you know where your product is. You've got an expectation built all the way through as to where it's going to land with you, when it's going to land with you. So why is it important? What's the size of the prize? Well, you know, we talked about the dollar figures up front, and obviously the dollar figures will be different for each of you in your different industries. But so what's the size of the prize for competitive advantage delivered through that seamless omni-channel supply chain? What new business opportunities are there with the innovation in the omni-channel across your warehousing, fulfillment, and transportation services? How can you change that around, or how can you add to it? What more margin are you going to get from some cross-channel inventory visibility, reducing the costs through optimization and an agile logistics network? Optimizing the inventory using proper and precise inventory data control measures, providing that consistent, high quality customer service, however that might be, chatbots, emails, phones, in-store experience. Using the real-time big data analytics, AI to constantly evolve with the customer's ever-changing customer demands and needs. And whilst there's going to be a big cost involved in moving from the legacy systems, what's the opportunity you get out of that? How are you going to write that business case to actually step yourself forward, you know, 1 or 2 steps in maturity of your back end? And so there's some alignment and anticipation there. So, you know, why is it important to a wider group of people than just the retailer? Well, whether you're customer facing or supporting customer facing partners, B2B or B2C, you know, you need to be aware of these new business models. So 2017, DHL stated that global B2B e-commerce sales overtook B2C sales, meaning that logistics providers need to meet demands for more flexibility and visibility. Now, that trend might be more overseas at this point in time, but it signals some of the change that might actually arrive here, even though we possibly haven't seen that yet. So how are you going to align yourself with the partner or with your retail team around a try and buy, or a delivery to a car, or a delivery to a lockbox? How are you going to get the lockbox code or key to the person that needs to actually put the goods in the box? And carrying on the IT theme, how well prepared are you to contribute to a shared platform between manufacturers, retailers, and logistics providers? So you've all got a shared view and visibility of the demand and inventory levels. So when do we need to start? And you've probably got a flavour of my view on this from how we've built this up so far. Across markets and categories, omnichannel retail is no longer really a future aspiration, but a baseline requirement. Tech-savvy customers demand it. Companies can either meet this expectation or watch those customers depart for more digitally savvy competitors. So said PwC. And really, some of that would come back to the whole broadband thing. A study that was done from 2015 to 2018 across the top sort of 15 online countries by online shopping. The top 5 were still consistent: USA, China, UK, Canada, and Australia. There was a bit of close correlation around broadband access there, but I suggest that's also sort of a societal thing and a cultural thing in terms of being able to go online as well. If we look at the DHL radar from 2018, 2019, and Tom and I started talking about this probably earlier in the year and had a look at this and said, right, well, what are the big things that Intent should be looking at? And Omnichannel came out to the fore. And again, I said, well, we were trying to do that 10 years ago. Why is it still here? And I presume, people are still trying to grapple with this, particularly from the logistics perspective. DHL might have a little bit of self-serving interest in putting it so highly on the radar, but it is still important. So in terms of where this sits here, it's relevant within the next couple of years, and it's near this part of the radar that's high. So it's not out on the low part here. And so if we wind this forward a year and look at the 2019-2020 version, it's crept in a little bit. So it's probably relevant in 18 months now. But it's key to see that some of these other things have actually, that we would think is probably quite topical: sustainable logistics, rethinking packaging, are still a bit further out. So DHL is still rating this as one of the burning platforms for people to deal with. And I coming from a bit of a technology background at the same time, I'm interested in Internet of Things, big data analytics, cloud APIs, because those are the things that if you get these right, you can actually enable your omni-channel logistics. So we have a burning platform. What are you going to do about it, and how are you going to go about it? So who actually needs to be involved? So we know this, it's hard for companies, it's easy for the customer. So the customer's at the center of this thing, and the person that really engages with the customer is the sales and marketing team. So they really need to build a picture of the customer and figure out the customer segmentation. And as my article referenced previously, the work of John Gatorna, that's a great place to start with thinking about your customers, your segmentation, and what supply chain is needed for each segment, and build the value proposition around that. So the sales and marketing team can then work with the operations team. They do all the heavy lifting, not just the talking. The heavy lifting is the important bit, and why we're all online here thinking about this. So you can build out that supply chain that's going to meet that expectation. But these two teams can't do it on their own. You need these guys, the IT team, and it's probably wider than just the IT team. You need subject matter experts back from retail and the sales team involved in that, analytics, and from the operations team looking at how those platforms are actually going to work and how they're actually going to deliver that fulfillment to the customer. So you can't probably do this on your own. There's upstream and downstream partners, or if you've outsourced your logistics, they need to be involved. And certainly that's where I think, the third-party logistics companies need to be across this as much as the retailer and the customer, because you're going to have to provide the agility for your partners in the supply chain. Nothing's going to go ahead without getting the CEO and the exec team on, so they can get on the change journey and give everybody the why we need to change. And then you need to get that project management office and change management office organized and sorted, so they can get on with the delivery of it. So, it is a coalition of the willing, really. The majority of the enterprise and its partners are going to be involved. But how do you unify those? So how do you focus on what you need to do? What's the problem statement that's going to pull everybody together? And how are you going to form that kind of future state that's right for your business, right for your customers, right for the maturity of your industry, and build that action plan? So where do we start? Well, part of it's understanding your own problem. So you've got to define that problem. You could use a problem solve template to capture it, put it all on one page. That would make it easy to define and share across the team. The other way, building on what Gatorna was thinking about, that good practice, it's all about customer centricity. So let's start with the customers and our customer segments here on either side of the supply chain, and walk the supply chain backwards from what they might need, how they might go to market, how we might get the product to them, all the way back to where it's manufactured or stored. And within that, you've got to kind of understand your problems. Are you not delivering on time? Customers not happy with the end product? Is it actually costing you too much to deliver and administrate? You might actually find that you've got multiple problems to deal with. So then you're going to need to go through some sort of prioritization as to which one to solve first. If you need some inspiration, though, here's a few we've built up in terms of those key challenges. Siloed mindsets, cultures of legacy and multi-channel businesses may prevent supply chains from evolving to meet omni-channel demands. And certainly 10 years ago, trying to do this with a large enterprise was actually quite challenging in terms of getting engagement of some of the people who just wanted to carry on selling in a store, and they weren't worried about trying to create promotions or change prices to get it online, and adding the extra capability in the call center to know the customer well enough and to pick up any pieces that fell through the gaps of the omni-channel we were trying to create and be the fixing place. We've talked about the challenging customer expectations and enabling the ease of the returns. There's a complexity of the software integration, trying to write the business case for the investment, and it's not just the IT software itself, it's the retooling of the skills and capability you need in the back end to drive this. And really, it's going to cost somebody a lot of hours of effort to get the business cases together, get the drive together, get the whole organization to pull in the same direction. And so going on again, so where do we start practically? Let's map out our supply chain, and let's put some dollars against each of those flows. So we've got a good value chain analysis, and organizations should have this now, whether they're doing omni-channel or not. Maybe we need to go back to level 1 and 1.5 and make sure this is in place first. But this type of analysis helps you understand what the flows are. Can they be aligned to the value? What could inventory holding be reduced by? What network costs could be taken out? What are the practical steps to implementing these strategies? And so these are all good questions, especially when you start to lay on this type of stuff now in terms of the future of fulfillment. So, what can your partners do? Have your partners got a distribution store? Is there a dark store? And I did hear down in Dunedin, Noel Leemings have actually closed a store that was customer facing and turned it into a dark store for that local online or omni-channel delivery. Can you use a partner store? Have you got a pop-up node to go and service customers at a market or at a big gathering like a concert or something like that? Are you ready to go and deliver to a car in a car park somewhere? or actually bypass the whole thing and go and get it printed 3D at the customer's place. So there's all these different options now within that supply chain, and how are you going to fulfill to each of these? But you do now need to think about returns, and I've laboured this point a little bit about the information flows, being accurate in your data systems about where the inventory is. And still in New Zealand, there's still the problem of the last mile delivery. Now, it's a lot easier when you've got, plus 6 million people in a city, and you can get a courier to go anywhere. It's a little bit different when people are up a RD1 delivery route. Do a touch analysis. So strategy number 1, no touch. What are the characteristics of your products that you could put in a no touch strategy? Straight to the customer. You're holding no inventory, but you can still make a margin on the ticket. Minimal touch. What considerations are there? Can I just devan it once and send it on? Might just touch the branch or a delivery person briefly, and you get it straight through. You might need to do some management of the inventory. Or is it a full touch product where you've actually got to go through full devanning, full storage, needs to be handled 2 or 3 times through a DC, through a branch, and you've actually got to go through your sales and operational process and actually manage the inventory. So I quite like this way of thinking about it, and then going back to the map we had before and going, right, so what product can go through that value chain? And on into the data. So you're going to have data across your website, your warehouse stuff, your product life cycle, your customers, and your website. How do you get an amalgamated view of that to be able to know your products, your customers through all of those different things at the top there, including my little surfboard pop-up shop there on the combi on the top right. You've got to be able to process all of that so that you've got a single view of your stock, your customers, your orders, and your products. And that will help you both in your day-to-day, month-to-month sales and operational planning. You need to plan around your strategic assets. Do you actually need a store anymore? Like the example earlier, or do you need a warehouse, or do you just convert your store into a warehouse now? Decision making about product lines, your channel strategies, your segmentation, and where do you hold your inventory so you're close to the point of the demand. And just when you think you've got all that sorted, then there's all the partner data upstream and downstream to bring in, so you actually have a better visibility of the end-to-end. And so a bit more on where do you start. So you probably need to think about how mature your omni-channel is at the moment, where that needs to be. Realistically, how fast or how far do you want to go with that journey in terms of maturity? And before you get too carried away, how complex is your omni-channel? How many nodes or fulfillment centers, fulfillment methods do you really need for your customer segmentation? And then think through the end-to-end. So your business sets your strategy, you're thinking about your customer centricity, your supply and demand, which is the big enabler of the whole omni-channel experience, through the customer making the selection, the transaction, their moment of truth. And that becomes a bit fractured these days. Your moment of truth previously was probably when you went into the store, got really excited that you paid for it, went home and unboxed it. With different products now, servitization of products, when is the moment of truth? Have you bought it online and you're gratified online? Have you bought it, you wait 7 days for it to be delivered, and then you don't get full value until a little bit later? And then that enduring relationship. So it's, my understanding of the omni-channel is you're not just selling once, you need to keep that relationship and you need to keep that customer, because if they go and find a better experience elsewhere, they'll drop you. And underneath all that, have you really thought about the enablers in your business, the KPIs of your new business model to ensure that you can deliver, but understand whether it's working in the future? And I'm a big one for getting something on a page and drawing a picture. So how can you actually draw it on a page and be able to show it and communicate it to it? How can you communicate that to your frontline team that you're not actually disenfranchising them in the store because we're doing this in a different way, which is some of the kickback we had 10 years ago. I don't like what you're doing over there. It's doing me out of a job, mate. So how about your corporate comms and making that really simple for them? So how do you start? I mean, having been in an enterprise and now consulting to enterprises, there's people with lots of point projects on the go, and that's fine as a method of getting something going. But you might end up with a lot of point projects that actually don't join in the middle. So it's probably better to go out and set your strategic future state, get all those people, get your coalition of the willing that we described earlier, get them together, and just invest in a whole coordinated program of work. So you know where you're going, you can communicate that, and you can take everybody on that journey with you, including your customers. So I'll just leave you with a piece from McKinsey this year. Enabling a truly end-to-end omni-channel experience requires a new way of supply chain thinking. Supply chain needs to be readjusted based on changing market conditions. Players should pursue an agile approach that enables them to adjust quickly to changing trends, options, and customer expectations. These principles can help determine the approach to building the network and the ecosystem of the future. So, thanks for listening. I'll hand you back to Rob, who might facilitate a few questions.
Thanks, Mark. Thank you very much for what was a very insightful and interesting content around omnichannel logistics. Now, there's quite a few questions have actually popped up already. And so because we've got a reasonably small number of people on tonight, what I might do is I'll actually just read out the questions I've got so far, but I'll actually enable everyone to talk, actually, because it would probably be easier. Let's see if I can do this with everyone. I've just enabled Harriet to talk.
Right.
And what I'll do anyway, here we go, I can do this with all of you. Just let me press the button on this.
Enable all.
Enable all. There isn't a bloody enable all on this thing, but anyway, I'll just click on this one. And then in turn, there we go. It's popping up. That's great. And what I'll do, I think I'll just get everyone to, if they've got any questions, just unmute your mic and ask a question. But first off, what I'll do is that Tom's actually popped up some questions, so I'll just ask that on his behalf.
Yep.
Essentially, the first question is from Tom is the experience, Mark, in more mature markets that omni-channel capability increases revenues through gaining market share?
Great question, Tom. Through the reading I've done, I don't have any empirical data to that, but the big players in the US are still piling into this. Macy's, Nordstrom made some early inroads, and certainly Walmart have now had a belated go at getting online and doing omnichannel because of the threat of Amazon. But to me, it's really interesting that Amazon are coming back onto the high street, because they've obviously built themselves in a way, and they've got so far with the online that they feel they need to come back onto the high street in some way.
Another question that Tom's raised is, do you think, Mark, that omnichannel demands actually cause suppliers to limit the amount of product variation to make it easier to manage the logistics of supply?
Yeah, that would be that would be kind of the hedgehog defensive approach, and that's possible, but I think the customer demand would really prefer it the other way, and I think you need to kind of go a bit wider with your products to really keep the customers interested in your offering and channel.
So, if that's the case, where is this all going then? What do you think is next? And could New Zealand step over a phase in what you described the progress, arguably is or supposed to be with omni-channel logistics development?
Yeah, so the next line's been described in the next iteration has been described in a couple of ways. You know, the partner omni-channel where it's everybody's leveraging off each other across your partner network, and there's this concept of no line commerce. So you've almost gone from multi-channel to omni to no channel. Everything's just the same. And so, yes, New Zealand possibly could do, because I think as a society and collaboratively and a small population, we could probably move to that model and take more cost down to the whole supply chain.
So if New Zealand were
So,
to actually skip a phase per se, and this leads on to another question that Tom's raised, which I was thinking about myself earlier on when you were going through your presentation, Mark, is that, outfits like Amazon are now opening bricks and mortar stores again, the big boys and the small fry. So is this really mainly to provide local inventory, stores that actually hold inventory rather than major DCs for customers to collect? Because, if, for example, if I look at IKEA in Japan, I did quite a bit of work with them a few years ago. Yes, they have, one national distribution center, but each store has a part of it allocated to be able to serve, online shopping or click and collect or their variant of that at the time. From the local store, as opposed to from a centralized point in a particular place, like, for example, the Greater Kanto region or the Greater Kansai region.
yeah,
So is that kind of sort of mixture of either bricks and mortar or clicks and mortar? Are we doing back to the future here? Are we kind of going back to what it was to a certain extent 5 years ago, or is
yeah,
it a new way of doing things? And if that's the case, because this is I want to sort of add to this as a question, is that, IKEA are moving into New Zealand, right? They'll be here in the next sort of, I guess, the 2 or 3 years. When I was working with them, one of the things that I pointed out to them about, we're back in 2010 now, is that the actual distribution network at the time, this was Courier Post, I said to them, you could actually only ever need to have one store in New Zealand. You would never necessarily have to create one in Auckland and then do one in Christchurch, because you could serve the entire nation through having one store with an associated distribution centre to serve, the whole nation, because the way of the express logistics network at the time was set up, and I believe to a certain extent still is. The actual ability for us to move goods through the postal network, through the courier network reasonably efficiently, because of New Zealand configured the way it is. Do you think we're going to be seeing more of that, or is there another way that New Zealand's kind of got a leapfrog that what we may have done, what we consider was the norm, 10 years ago? Where do you think we're going now?
there's quite a lot in all that.
Sorry about that.
What one thought is, if you look at what the banks are doing in rural towns at the moment, so in Twizel, you've got one branch, and it's a collaboration between ASB, Westpac, and BNZ. So if you think of that model and think of what you're talking about, why couldn't there be an omni-channel intermediary that is the white room for large players, and to be almost a one-stop shop? I think with IKEA, there was always a lot of stock in Europe about go and do the IKEA experience, where you had to walk through the whole shop, because there was no way of shortcutting the shop, and you had to walk through every department to get out again. And I believe they're kind of shortcutting some of that now with the sort of the web rooming, and allowing people to get around the store, but visualize pieces in an augmented reality type way. So I think they would probably still want a couple of stores here for that touch experience, but there's no reason why you couldn't get technology to take somebody through a web room type experience as well, and use the AR, VR, and see it in your home at the same time, and then get it delivered. You know, IKEA were very cute a long time ago with the delivery in Europe.
And of course, they were operating, I think the UK had some of their first metro sort of high street type stores, you know, much smaller retail footprint, to be able to, as you say, have part of that meandering blue box experience, but in a much more sort of concentrated fashion.
Yeah.
And do you see there's aspects of the way that we're doing things here, or the way the world is moving with omnichannel logistics, that we could actually miss a step or miss a couple of steps in order to either keep up or stay ahead in how we develop omnichannel logistics and transport here in New Zealand?
You'd like to think so. You know, a bit like East Africa jumped past copper telephone wire and went straight into mobile banking over the phone. Mainly because most of the copper ended up in jewelry sold to tourists. But yeah, I think there is the opportunity in New Zealand, but again, it's going to take some collective will, and who's going to drive that? Which main retailer, or indeed, you know, another party? You know, is it courier post themselves? Are they going to position themselves as the as the white omnichannel box for people to use, and step out of just the logistics piece and push themselves further towards the retailer and further back towards the supplier?
Well, history-wise, and I actually worked for New Zealand Post from 2000 through to 2007 here in New Zealand and over in Singapore, and there was a lot of discussion at the time about exactly that. To basically white label the entire network to for any retailer or any sort of origin point to use the network to get goods, whatever the size, etc., wherever in New Zealand. But as you say, 10 years have moved on, or more than that, 15 now, and it doesn't seem to have progressed any further. But if I understand you correctly, that means that there is the opportunity for an entity with an existing network infrastructure like that, or someone else who has that kind of infrastructure, to white label it in the same degree. Is that what I'm hearing you saying?
Yeah, so I think so. Look, if I always think the post office missed email. You know, the core business of a post office was to deliver a message, and they missed the fact that people were going to send a message over email rather than write a letter. You know, and their core business model should be about delivering a message, and they completely missed that. So here, I think they've possibly got an opportunity to actually think about what their business model is, and take it 2 steps forward to the new way of delivering.
So now I've unmuted everyone's mics. Is there anyone out there who'd just like to ask a question of Mark while we're here? As you know, myself and Tom have asked a lot of questions of Mark already. I'm sure a lot of you out there have got questions. But look, if you don't, then please, I think you've got my email somewhere, and certainly up on the CILT website, you can always submit questions to us through the info@cilt.co.nz address, and that comes through to us as section chairs for then forwarding on to the speakers who've actually been part of our webinars over the last few weeks and months. So if there are no more questions, in fact, let me just close the window, otherwise we're going to get some background noise here. Right, back again now. So look, if there are no further questions, I'd like to bring this webinar to a close. And on behalf of everyone present, I'd like to thank Mark very much on behalf of everyone here for your really, really interesting topic on omnichannel logistics. Something that I think, to be honest, in a COVID world, particularly down in here in New Zealand, we need to pay a hell of a lot more attention to going forward. And if I may, Mark, I might like to call you back sometime next year, because this is actually a conversation that doesn't begin and end here. There's a lot more that we need to learn. And I believe in the next 6 months, the way that we're moving in New Zealand is going to necessitate a follow-up discussion on omnichannel or a variant thereof. So I hope we can bring you back at some stage during 2021.
Yeah, no, that would be really interesting. Yeah, thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much, Mark, and thank you very much to Intent Group for loaning Mark to us tonight. And thank you everyone for being part of this webinar. May I wish you all on behalf of CILT a very Merry Christmas if I don't see you all between now and Christmas Day. And we will be ramping up our events again in February, March. So stay tuned for the next invitation out to either a webinar or a physical event. We look forward to seeing you all next year. Stay safe, have a great festive season, and see you all in 2021.
Great, thank you.